Valerius was neither tall nor short. He was not handsome or ugly, neither muscular nor overweight. His unbound hair was medium length, and his stance ambivalent. He walked with a quiescent stroll and spoke with banal lethargy. In summary, he was a man many overlooked. Behind Valerius, the balcony's iron door swung open without a whisper, admitting a quartet of his guards. Their faces were concealed behind nondescript veils, marking them as eunuchs. The veils were a facade, serving instead to conceal the pale skin and large eyes of Eastern sellswords. Everins abhorred foreigners, but Eastern sellswords far surpassed any warrior he could find in the Avarice Desert, so Valerius made an exception. Everins were too addicted to the plethora of drugs the Kelvonders supplied to become adept warriors. It was a disgruntling result, but sufferable when compared to the control and wealth they amassed through preserving the Everins' addictions. The sellswords advanced to encircle him, cautiously maintaining the appropriate partition. Their commander knelt before Valerius, laying his brow on the floor and assuming the posture of due reverence. When the man looked up, Valerius nodded once, suffering the sellsword to straighten. Valerius Kelvonder. Krell Kelvonder desires an audience. His message completed, the sellsword resumed his abasement. Valerius deliberated. Krell Kelvonder desired either to offer an alliance, at least the discussion thereof, or to exact tribute. Either way, his response was the same, a waved hand to the sellsword at his side, motioning for him to admit Krell Kelvonder. His guest did not wait for the summons. She stormed into view with all the grace of a schismatic boulder and collapsed into a seat, exuding just enough arrogance to compound her dominance, but not enough to merit retaliation. Raising an eyebrow, he watched the corpulent woman collapse into the vacant chair with an anguished sigh of relief. Immediately, Krell Kelvonder began patting her multiple chins and forehead with a silk handkerchief, and then adjusted her apparel with bulbous hands. Her retinue trailed in behind her, the half-dozen guards first, followed by her numerous slaves and contracted attendants, specialists courted through offers of wealth and power. The first of the three was a guardian of the Mercenaries Guild, armored in leather with an iron shield slung across his back and shoulder-length hair pulled tight across his skull by ivory pins. The second was her gamekeeper, dressed in a white overtunic with the minor embellishments of his class. The gamekeeper wore his hair just above the shoulders, betraying his lack of proficiency, and woven into 3 separate tails. The final man was her assassin. He dressed in black, his lowered face concealed behind a conforming mask, and his hair styled into an elaborate knot of braids. The man displayed a single skull dagger on his hip, marking him as a minor assassin at best. To skilled Kelvonders, attendants provide another form of manipulation and deceit. Their number, specializations, and wealth all collaborate to fashion a mirage of the Kelvonders' wealth, inclinations, and power. In general, the game's true intricacies reserved themselves for the greater Kelvonders, who had the wealth and time to squander. Krell Kelvonder's gamekeeper conferred that she enjoyed the many violent southern sports, but his lack of gaudy embellishment signified she lacked the wealth to hire a true master of the art. The guardian and assassin in her retinue suggested ties to the guilds. The evidence of their true allegiance indicated she was deeply indebted to their masters. Valerius had no attendants, blatantly declaring his lack of wealth and prestige. Their absence was a careful ploy. When another Kelvonder saw him surrounded by only slaves and guards, they would view him as weak, inexperienced, and easily controlled. The contempt they derived from these emotions would blind them, hampering their already fumbling intellects. Valerius waited as the obese woman shifted in her seat, searching for comfort despite how she inundated its constraints, the heavy flesh of her body sagging like warm gelatin. Upon realizing the futility of her endeavor, she slumped forward with a snap of her fingers. One of her servants, a male child slave who bore more scars than he did locks of his waist-length hair, scurried forward bearing a flask of cold wine. She snatched the wine and raised it to her lips for a long gulp. The seconds passed, and the slave ran back to hide in the mass of her retainers. Krell lowered the wineskin with a belch, plastered a counterfeit smile across her swollen, overpainted features, and spoke. "'Tis a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance, Valerius." She made a lilting gesture to exemplify the intensity of her emotions and gulped more wine. Valerius tapped the balcony's floor with his cane, a beautiful artifact with an amethyst core wrapped in carved vines of ebony and rowan. Those vines guarded the innate brilliance that shimmered within the amethyst's core, a heart of slowly pulsing light. "The pleasure is mutual." The inebriated woman tittered and gulped her wine. When she lowered the wineskin, she replaced it with a larger, no less sickening smile. "I have been watching you for some time now, Valerius." He nodded in acknowledgement. Throughout the last turning, Valerius had been steadily feeding Krell a feast of rumors and lies regarding information he possessed that, if brought to light, could destroy her. She had devoured his banquet of lies like a prize-winning pig until, through gradual submersion, she now drowned in it. Trailing another gulp, Krell resumed her discourse. "What with Krell death, wisdom dictates that we ally ourselves." Krell had been her sole ally. Thus, Valerius ordained his destruction. Freyden Kelvander, Grail's pawn, also perished in the massacre. The death of her ally left Krell as the sole distributor of a rare hyper-addictive toxin. This solitude made her vulnerable, while the resource made her a target. She needed an ally. Krell, however, was an unimportant member of the Kelvander hierarchy. Necessity demanded she find an inferior ally, or at least an equal she did not fear. Of the Kelvanders in Sadaean, only Valerius matched these requirements. With little more than a score of warriors and a small fortune, Valerius lacked the military threat Krell brought to their conference. Her meager intelligence, however, more than settled this imbalance. Licking her lips, Krell strove to control her anxious shifting without success. Every law of politics and self-preservation dictated Valerius should leap at the opportunity to make an alliance with Krell. Her military power was insignificant compared to most Kelvanders, but it still far surpassed his own and would fortify his position substantially. Appearances are deceptive, however. Both Kelvanders knew she could not survive without an ally. Her vulnerability was a beacon, and Sadaea never lacked for vultures. "We both know why you seek an alliance with me, Kelvander." He waved a hand delicately toward her as if conceding something. "You need time. Time that only I can provide with any modicum of fidelity or even desire. While he spoke, Krell gulped the red wine and exchanged the empty flask with her slave. The liquor, though, did little to obscure the pale fright dominating her features. "So, let us dispense with these time-consuming political games." Valerius reclined, nodding for Krell to present her offer. She blinked, mouth hanging agog, as her befuddled mind tried to rouse itself from intoxication. Finally, she smiled in a confused manner, nodded, and began speaking. "Very well, then. How?" She struggled for words complimenting on the surface, but insulting at the core. "Concise." Almost gasping from the effort, she celebrated with more wine. "Let's see. Huh?" Her brows crinkled, and she shook her head. "Oh, yes. It should begin with a promise of both offensive and defensive military support. Yes. A large portion of the annotate drug also. Not equal, but certainly profitable. Krell collapsed back into her seat and drank the rest of her new wine flask before reaching for another. I will match your brevity. Valerius leaned forward, grinding his cane onto the floor. I desire all you offer, but you will also nominate me as the sole heir to your estates in the event of your death. Valerius bowed his head, ceding her the opportunity to ponder his convoluted overture. In the higher echelons of Kelvander hierarchy, Valerius's offered alliance was a statement of superiority and a gamble on who could murder their ally first. Another possibility was a simple desire for increased wealth. Valerius, younger and significantly healthier than Krell Kelvander, was almost certain to inherit her wealth at some point. Krell Kelvander examined his features with a calculating light in her beady, drunken eyes. Valerius met her gaze calmly, evincing an absolute lack of guile. Ultimately, she looked away, and Valerius turned to observe the arena. Krell Kelvander coughed, her decision reached. The inheritance article would be mutual. She glared, challenging him to refute her. Valerius gave the woman a smile of affirmation, both reassuring and warily good-natured. Of course. She maintained her glower for a long pause. Then she nodded, her manner becoming subdued, and reached into the voluminous folds of her dress to withdraw a felt quill. It was an object of wrought gold and vibrant mahogany, marked at its base with a single rune unique to its species. Valerius extended his left hand. Krell Kelvander hesitated before surrendering the precious object. Closing his eyes, Valerius explored the quill, his deft fingers stroking its length without missing a single detail. He shivered, already immersed in the vast age of this artifact, and age meant power. It was a blood quill, doubtlessly inherited through countless generations of her family for a single primordial function. Valerius, his face impassive, returned the blood quill. She raised it to her lips with a quick nod and kissed the rune at its base. Then, withdrawing the quill from her lips, she lifted her right hand and pricked her thumb on the blood quill's tip. A grimace flashed across her features as she reversed the blood quill and pressed her thumb into the rune at its base, bathing the delicate sigil in unyielding blood. Scowling at her injury, Krell gestured for another slave to bring a page of vellum. Placing it across her knees, she set the quill to the vellum and wrote the laws of their alliance in her blood. When she finished, Krell offered Valerius the blood quill, her features paler now despite the drunken blush. Accepting it, he did as she had done, first slicing his palm, then writing the oath and his name in blood. With their alliance forged and bound in blood, Valerius reclined into his seat, waiting for his vow to take hold. The blood oath's ethereal constraints enveloped him, fettering his actions and forcing him, despite his formidable will, to abide by the oath he swore. Valerius ignored the sensation and watched the vellum's lettering change, gracefully warping from recognizable script to archaic words of power. The letters, 1,000-fold older than any script in all the Avarice Desert, eclipsed his knowledge to decipher. They were the Arthramanian script, the words of kings. Rising to his feet with smooth grace, Valerius gestured for Krell to accompany him and for the guards to stay back. Wrapping Krell's arms in his own, Valerius advanced to the balustrade, allowing his attention to wander the arena. At his side, Valerius Kelvander settled her bulbous form upon the railing with a repulsive sigh. Meanwhile, their movement surreptitious, Valerius's sellswords moved to stand behind Krell's guards. Valerius turned his gaze away from the arena and onto her. It did not matter if she caught him, because a woman like her would see only a man intoxicated by her beauty, much as the wine intoxicated her. Valerius, however, did not find her beautiful. He sought a reaction rather than beauty. Specifically, her reaction to the sudden gurgles of her dying guards as Valerius's sellsword struck